My name is Emily Carter, and the night my husband left me, I didn't cry. I was standing in our kitchen in Austin, Texas, barefoot on cold marble tiles, holding a coffee mug I never even drank from. The clock on the wall said 11:47 p.m. I remember the time clearly because that was the moment my old life ended. Quietly, without warning, without mercy. "Emily, I'm not happy anymore," Jason said, adjusting his expensive watch like he was about to leave for a meeting, not walk out on a 7-year marriage. No shouting. No apology. Just a sentence delivered like a business decision. I watched him grab his jacket, the same jacket I bought him after his first promotion. The door closed behind him with a soft click. That sound stayed with me longer than his words. People think divorce happens in courtrooms or screaming matches. Mine happened in silence. For weeks after that night, I told myself I was fine. I woke up, went to work, smiled at coworkers, answered emails. On the outside, I was the same Emily, marketing manager, reliable friend, strong woman. Inside, I was hollow. Jason didn't just leave me. He erased me. He stopped answering my calls. His lawyer sent emails before he did. I found out through mutual friends that he'd already moved in with someone else, a younger woman from his office. Blonde. Confident. Pregnant with promises I once believed were mine. I replayed our marriage in my head like a broken movie. The late nights he said were work emergencies. The sudden gym obsession. The way he stopped looking at me when I spoke. I blamed myself. Maybe I worked too much. Maybe I wasn't exciting enough. Maybe love really does expire. One evening, as I sat alone in our living room, my living room now, I opened a drawer looking for old documents. That's when I found something I wasn't supposed to. A file. Property papers. My name. The house we lived in? It wasn't fully his. The savings account he controlled? Half of it was legally mine. And the startup he always called my company? I was listed as an early silent investor. I laughed. Not a happy laugh. A dangerous one. For the first time since he left, I felt something other than pain. Control. That night, I didn't sleep. I made coffee and sat by the window, watching the city lights of Austin flicker like they were whispering secrets. I realized something important. Jason thought I was weak because I was quiet. He thought silence meant surrender. He was wrong. From that moment on, I made myself one promise. I would never beg, never chase, never explain myself again. If Jason wanted a clean exit, I'd give him one. But I'd also make sure he remembered exactly who he walked away from. As I sat there, staring at those papers, one question kept running through my mind, and I wonder what you would have done in my place. If someone you trusted destroyed your life without warning, would you walk away quietly, or would you rebuild yourself so strong that they'd regret ever underestimating you? The divorce process started fast. Jason wanted it done amicably. That word still makes me smile. He didn't know I'd already met with a lawyer. He didn't know I was documenting everything, messages, timelines, financial details. And he definitely didn't know that the woman he left me for wasn't as loyal as he believed. I stayed calm. I stayed polite. I let him think he was winning. Because real revenge doesn't scream. It waits. On the outside, I looked like a woman learning to let go. On the inside, I was becoming someone he wouldn't recognize. And this was only the beginning. I didn't change overnight. I didn't suddenly become fearless or powerful. What changed was quieter, but far more dangerous. I learned how to observe. Jason believed the divorce was already settled in his favor. He sent short, polite emails. He smiled during mediation like a man relieved to be free. He even thanked me once for being so understanding. Understanding. That word burned. I moved out of the house without a fight, into a small apartment near South Congress Avenue. It was smaller, yes, but it was mine. Every box I unpacked felt like reclaiming a piece of myself he never truly owned. During the day, I worked harder than ever. Late nights at the office. Strategic meetings. Quiet wins no one applauded. My boss started noticing. Clients started asking for me by name. At night, I studied. I read every clause in the divorce papers. I learned how assets really worked. I learned how people expose themselves when they thought no one was watching. Jason started slipping. He posted photos online, vacations, dinners, smiles that looked a little too forced. He wanted the world to see him thriving without me. What he didn't realize was how carefully I was paying attention. The woman he left me for, Lena, wasn't subtle. She liked expensive restaurants, louder laughs, visible validation. She also liked attention from men who weren't Jason. I didn't interfere. I didn't warn him. I didn't need to. One afternoon, while reviewing financial statements with my lawyer, I noticed something odd. Jason had been moving money, small amounts, frequent transfers. Not illegal. Not yet. But careless. Do you want me to look deeper? My lawyer asked. I nodded once. That night, Jason called me for the first time in months. Emily, he said, sounding almost unsure. I just wanted to check in. You okay? I smiled to myself. I'm great, I said. And for the first time, it wasn't a lie. After that call, things shifted. He started asking questions about paperwork, timelines, details he'd previously ignored. He sensed something changing, even if he couldn't name it. People always feel it when control starts slipping. Meanwhile, my life was expanding. I started going to events I was always too busy for before. I met people who didn't know me as Jason's wife, only as Emily, a woman with ideas, with presence, with a past she no longer apologized for. Then came the email. Not from Jason. From Lena. It was short, nervous, almost polite. Emily, I think we should talk. I stared at the screen for a long time. This was the moment I had imagined, but I didn't feel excited. I felt calm, calculated, ready. I agreed to meet her at a cafe downtown, not far from the river. Neutral ground. Public. Safe. She arrived late. Her confidence faltered the second she saw me. You don't look how I expected, she said. I raised an eyebrow. Neither do you. She talked fast. Too fast. About misunderstandings. About Jason's stress. About things she didn't know when they started seeing each other. I let her talk. When she finished, I leaned forward slightly and said the one thing she didn't expect. You should be careful, I told her softly. Men who lie once rarely stop. Her face went pale. I left before she could respond. I didn't need answers from her. I already had something better. Information. The divorce proceedings intensified after that. Jason grew defensive. He pushed for faster deadlines. His lawyer made mistakes. Small ones, but expensive. He accused me once, during mediation, of trying to hurt him. I looked him in the eyes and said calmly, I'm just protecting myself. Isn't that what you taught me? He had no answer. By the time he realized what was happening, the narrative had shifted. The balance had tilted. The woman he thought he had broken was standing stronger than ever, silent, composed, and untouchable. But my revenge wasn't finished. Because taking back what was mine was only step one. Step two was letting him see exactly what he lost. I didn't announce my transformation. I didn't post dramatic captions or seek validation. I simply lived, fully, intentionally, without looking back. Jason noticed before anyone else did. It started with small things. Mutual friends mentioning my name in conversations he wasn't part of. A colleague congratulating me on a campaign I led, one that outperformed every projection. A quiet buzz around the office where I was no longer someone's wife, but someone people listened to. Meanwhile, his world was shrinking. The startup he once bragged about began facing delays. Investors asked questions. Confidence wavered. Lena stopped attending events with him. When she did, she stayed distant. Her phone always face down, her smile always forced. I ran into Jason unexpectedly at a charity networking event near downtown Austin.
He froze when he saw me.
I didn't. I was wearing a simple black dress, nothing dramatic, just clean lines and quiet confidence. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. That's what made it powerful. You look different, he said. So do you, I replied gently. We spoke like strangers catching up. Weather, work, neutral topics. But beneath every word was tension, unspoken truths pressing against the surface. "You seem happy," he said finally. "I am," I answered. No hesitation. That was when it hit him. Not anger, not jealousy, regret. A few days later, his lawyer called mine. Jason wanted to renegotiate. I smiled when I heard that. By then, I had leverage, not because I took anything from him, but because I had rebuilt myself into someone he could no longer control, predict, or dismiss. At the same time, another door opened. A former client, Daniel, reached out. He'd followed my work for years, but never crossed professional boundaries. Now, he invited me to consult on a major project based out of New York City. It was an opportunity one would have declined before. This time, I said yes. New city, new energy, new perspective. New York didn't heal me. It sharpened me. I stayed busy, focused, alive in ways I had forgotten were possible. For the first time in years, my life wasn't shaped around someone else's needs. Jason called one night while I was standing by my hotel window, city lights stretching endlessly below. "I made a mistake," he said. I closed my eyes, not in pain, but in clarity. "I know," I replied. He talked about memories, about what we used to be, about how everything happened too fast. I listened. Then I said, "You didn't lose me when you left. You lost me when you stopped valuing who I was becoming." Silence. I hung up before he could respond. Back in Austin, the final divorce hearing approached. Jason was anxious. I was calm. When the papers were signed, he looked at me like he expected tears. Closure. Something emotional. I gave him none of it. Because closure isn't something you give someone else. It's something you claim for yourself. But my story didn't end with freedom. It evolved. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't winning the divorce. It's winning the life that comes after. And the truth was, Jason wasn't ready for what came next.
Neither was I.
Freedom felt different than I imagined. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was steady, like breathing without realizing you were once suffocating. After the divorce was finalized, I stayed away from Austin for a while. New York had a way of reminding me who I could be when no one was watching my past. Meetings turned into contracts. Contracts turned into long-term offers. My name began circulating in rooms Jason would never be invited into. Still, part of me knew unfinished stories have a way of calling you back. I returned to Austin in early fall. The city looked the same. I didn't. Jason's life, however, had unraveled faster than even I expected. The startup lost a key investor. Lena was gone, no dramatic exit, just absence. Friends who once surrounded him slowly disappeared. One afternoon, I received a message from an unknown number. "Emily, it's Jason. Please, I need to talk." I stared at the screen longer than I should have. We met at the same cafe by the river where I had once spoken to Lena. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. Jason looked tired, older, smaller. "I didn't realize what I had until it was gone," he said, voice cracking just enough to sound sincere. I didn't interrupt. "I thought leaving would fix everything," he continued. "But it just exposed how much I depended on you." There it was. The truth, too late to matter. "I'm not here to ask you back," he said quickly. "I just need to know if you're okay." I studied him carefully. The man who once held my future in his hands now looked like someone asking for permission to breathe. "I am more than okay," I said softly. "I'm whole." His eyes filled with something close to tears. For a moment I felt it, the echo of what we used to be. The life we planned. The version of me that loved him without limits. Then I let it go. Because loving yourself sometimes means walking away without anger. A week later, something unexpected happened. I was offered a permanent leadership role, one that required splitting my time between Austin and New York. It was everything I once dreamed of, but never thought I deserved. That night, I stood alone on my balcony, city lights glowing below, thinking about the woman I had been when this story began. The woman who stood barefoot in a kitchen, abandoned and silent. I barely recognized her now. Jason sent one final email. "I hope you find everything you're looking for." I didn't reply, not because I was bitter, but because my story no longer needed his acknowledgement. Yet even as I moved forward, I knew one thing remained. There was one last choice to make. One final chapter to close, not with revenge, not with forgiveness, but with truth. Because the hardest part of rebuilding isn't proving someone wrong. It's deciding who you become after they no longer matter. And that decision would change everything. I didn't rush it. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to sit with uncertainty, not as fear, but as freedom. I had options now. Real ones. Not survival choices, but intentional ones. Austin or New York. Familiar ground or limitless possibility. The woman I was or the woman I had become. I returned to the house one last time, the place where my marriage quietly ended. It was empty now, echoing. Sunlight filtered through the windows differently, like the walls themselves had exhaled. I walked room to room, not grieving, remembering. This was where I waited for a man who stopped choosing me. This was where I learned silence could hurt louder than words. And this was where I unknowingly planted the seed of my rebirth. I didn't feel anger. I felt gratitude. Because pain had introduced me to myself. A few days later, I made my decision. I accepted the role in New York. Not to escape my past, but because my future deserved more space than Austin could offer. I packed my life into boxes again, this time without fear. Each item carried intention. Nothing was accidental anymore. On my last night in the city, Jason called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. I heard you're moving, he said. Yes. I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I paused, then replied, I'm proud of me too. There was nothing left to explain. When I arrived in New York, the city welcomed me with noise, motion, possibility. I blended into the crowd and somehow stood out at the same time. I built routines, relationships, confidence that didn't depend on being chosen. Months passed. One morning, while walking through Central Park, coffee in hand, sunlight warming my face, I realized something quietly profound. I wasn't thinking about Jason. Not with anger. Not with sadness. Not at all. That was the moment I understood what real victory felt like. Revenge had never been about hurting him. It was about refusing to stay broken. I once believed divorce was the end of my story. It wasn't. It was the chapter where I stopped shrinking, stopped waiting, stopped begging for love that should have been freely given. My name is Emily Carter. I survived heartbreak. I reclaimed my voice. I rebuilt my life on my own terms. And if you're listening to this, feeling lost, abandoned, underestimated, know this. Sometimes the most powerful comeback isn't proving them wrong. It's becoming everything they never imagined you could be, and living so fully that they fade into a lesson you no longer need to revisit. The end.